Chapter 3. In order to operate re-education facilities for troublemaking kids, you needed to have some kind of system of oversight. You needed enforcers for sure, but a particular kind of enforcer. The kind who won't make friends because he's too busy punishing anyone who steps out of line. I have no doubt that there are adults out there who would love a job in which they got to punish 7th graders for failing to wear a "Have you hugged a fad today?" button. But those adults were probably needed as soldiers or torturers or fry cooks. No, the well-oiled phatic machines used other kids, and they were likely to be the worst bullies they could find. The oversized lowbrow who stood in front of me, pointing gleefully, was named Tanner Hughes. He'd tormented me back when I was in school, back in Delaware. And now here he was, in a uniform with license to torment weaker kids. Maybe the phatic invasion wasn't good for everyone, but for the Tanner Hughes of the world, it was like winning the lottery. "My name is Jean-Luc Pickard," I assured him, trying not to make eye contact. "I have no idea who this Zeke Reynolds guy is." "He sounds like a total troublemaker," Misun said. She'd come over to stand near me and had her arms folded, scowling at me like I'd done something wrong. "Go back to your seat, Sally Applesauce," Tanner Hughes commanded. And here I laughed, because I thought it sounded kind of funny. Unfortunately, that pretty much killed any chance we had of keeping things from escalating. Tanner Hughes looked at me again, and I could see any doubt he had about my identity was gone. "I know what your aura says, but you're definitely him." Tanner Hughes took out his smartphone. "I recognize you. You were a dork back before the invasion, and you're a dork now. They say you're some sort of renegade war criminal. Hard to believe a loser like you could make so many enemies." "I've always had a problem getting along with dimwits," I said with a shrug. "Yeah, well, I'm gonna get a promotion when I bring you in. I hear they already have medical experiment labs with your name on it at Planet Pleasant." He started to punch in a number on his phone, but only got about 2 digits in when the phone flew out of his hand and struck the wall with enough force to shatter it into a cloud of plastic and metal. I turned to see Alice pointing a finger like she'd just cast a magic missile.
Yeah, I know what Dr. Rube said, but I think we're done flying under the radar. Plus, did you guys see that? It was totally amazing."
"Who are you?" demanded Mr. Potato Head, who was now looking at us with something like awe. Mostly he was looking at Alice, but that was because she'd just demonstrated some flashy telekinesis, which had the side effects of making her already unruly hair frizz out. "We are no one you need worry yourself about," Charles said. Tanner Hughes' brow was wrinkled and his mouth reduced to a hard line. These were classic signs of a bully about to charge. I quickly checked my HUD, and before Tanner had taken more than 2 steps, I went for a skill I'd previously discovered while trying to figure out my skill tree. I'd been worried I wouldn't have a chance to try it out, but every once in a while the universe tosses you a softball. Not bothering to suppress a grin, I unleashed the molecular realigner, turning his sneakers back into their constituted parts, including petroleum. When you're moving forward and your footwear suddenly vanishes and is replaced with oil, there's only one possible result. Tanner slipped backwards, his butt landing in the pool where his shoes used to be. He continued to slide until he collided with the lunch table. "That was amazing," said Mr. Potato Head. "I want to join you guys." "Very kind of you, Mr. Potato Head," I told him, "but you don't want to get in trouble. Keep your head down until we can get things under control."
"No one needs to put themselves at risk," Alice told him. "But keeping this incident quiet for as long as possible would really help us."
"Forget that," Tanner Hughes said. He was on his feet and trying to look as intimidating as possible, which isn't easy when you're a shoeless kid with an oil slick on his butt. "If you think I'm going to be quiet when—" That was as far as he got before Charles thrust out his palm and shouted, "Repulsor blast!" and unleashed 50,000 volts of taser action into my old tormentor. Tanner convulsed for a few seconds and then collapsed into a silent, oily heap. "Nice touch," I said. "I found that very satisfying," he said. And with our business in the lunchroom complete, we fled. The original plan had been to wait until after lights out and slip into the records office at the top floor of the building. Any phatic computer system would be able to interface with its main communications network, which meant we'd be able to locate Tamret and the rest of our alien friends. Then all we had to do was get where they were being held and, using the stealth features from our military upgrades, break them out. We had hoped to be operating completely under the radar, but that part of the plan was out the window. Tanner Hughes was going to alert his superiors, and that meant they would know exactly who we were. The Fads were not going to miss the chance to capture me, not when I had become the public face of their galactic humiliation. Our maxed out skill trees, which had made us seem invulnerable only a few minutes ago, were very likely going to be pushed to the limits before we got off Earth. On the stairs we passed students, teachers, and trustees, none of whom eyed us with any suspicion. It was only a matter of time before someone in authority entered the cafeteria, or a kid looking to earn brownie points blew the whistle, but every second we avoided notice was a gift. We reached the top of the stairs and headed down the corridor towards the main records office. Standing in front of the door, holding a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a book in the other, was Mr. Authoritarian Hammer. He was engaged in a hushed conversation with another teacher, whose aura identified her as Miss Institutional Orderliness. I felt sure we could have walked past teachers we didn't know, coming up with some sort of convincing excuse for walking around, but our own teacher was going to want to know what we were up to. Was it better to knock them out and try to raid the computer system as quickly as possible, or invent a cover story that might buy us some time? I think we were all struggling with the same question.
"Will you excuse me?"
Mr. Authoritarian Hammer said to his colleague.
"I need a moment with my students."
She nodded and headed down the stairs.
"What are you doing up here?"
he asked us. We just wanted to check in the office to see if... This was as far as I got before I realized coming up with a reasonable lie was harder than I thought.
"If our schedules had been finalized,"
Charles finished,
"we were told they were subject to change, and our homeroom assignment might not be permanent."
We've just really enjoyed your particular approach to re-education,
Alice offered,
and want to make sure we continue to learn from you about the superiority of the Phatic way.
He studied us for a long moment, blinking slowly. He took a slurping sip from his coffee.
"For a bunch of delinquents," he said, "your lying game is weak."
Charles was about to repulsor blast him, but I shook my head. There was something about him that made me think we didn't need to electrocute him into unconsciousness. Maybe it was the fact that the book he was holding was the collected short fictions of Arthur C. Clarke. How evil can you be if you're reading one of the greats? I wondered if, as with Mr. Potato Head, I might have misread Mr. Authoritarian Hammer.
"What makes you think we're, that?"
Misun asked.
"You guys are really not blending in."
He gestured at me with his coffee.
"Plus, you have a look on your face like you're just putting up with this nonsense until you can bust out of here. Also, Gene Luck Pickard, come on."
"You have entirely mistaken us,"
Charles assured him.
"We are most certainly enthusiastic about the Phatic Empire of Prosperity."
He rolled his eyes.
"I didn't see you up here, and I'm not going to notice if you don't return from lunch. These behavior controllers they injected me with means that's the best I can do. If you blatantly step out of line, I'll be compelled to report you."
"Thanks, Mr. Authoritarian Hammer," I said. He forced a sad smile.
"I would tell you my real name, but the mods make it impossible for me to say it out loud."
I remembered another neat ability I hadn't known if I'd be able to use. "Well, let's do something about that," I said. I put a hand on his arm and allowed a microneedle to emerge from my fingertip and pierce his skin. This device injected a few million nanokillers into his bloodstream, on a mission to hunt down and dismantle all Phatic invaders. They needed about 6 seconds to complete their work, after which both invader and defender would break down into their atomic components and be harmlessly passed through the host's urine and feces. More information than you maybe wanted, but still it's better to know than to wonder. Mr. Authoritarian Hammer was now looking at his arm, where he'd felt the slight pinprick.
"What did you just do to me?"
"You've been scrubbed clean," I said. "Act normal and they'll never know, but your behavior-modifying nanites are gone." Mr. Authoritarian Hammer looked off into the distance, maybe thinking unkind thoughts about the Fads to see if he felt a jolt of nausea or discomfort. He then turned to me and grinned.
"I'm Thomas Link,"
he whispered.
"It worked. And you're not ordinary troublemakers. Who are you?"
"We're the invader's worst nightmare," I said. A bunch of middle school kids with dangerous technology we don't really understand or know how to control. And then we entered the office, where we had our first encounter with fads since our return to Earth.